Hi, everyone. This is Shannon. I wanted to come on quickly before the start of the episode to let you know that this will be our last episode of the year and to thank you for listening, for liking, subscribing, and following us. We have really appreciated your support and feedback. I also wanted to address the elephant in the room, which is our pretty terrible sound quality. The episode you're about to listen to is also not the best sound quality. We've done our best to clean it up post-production, but it's still a little rough. Starting this podcast, we had a serious learning curve. We hope it hasn't been too much of a deterrent and that you've enjoyed the content despite the sound. We also want you to know that we're working on it, and in the new year is going to bring higher sound quality. So happy holidays to you, and thank you again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in 2025.
This podcast may contain discussions of graphic violence, unsettling themes, supernatural phenomena, and other topics that some listeners may find disturbing or triggering. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed are simply those of the individual hosts and do not represent the profession of psychology or constitute professional advice.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Secret Passage podcast.
Hi.
I'm Dana Vespoli. I'm not sure, do we need to introduce ourselves every single time?
I think so. I'll say, and I'm Shannon.
Yeah. And yes, we are here, episode 6. Possibly, might be episode 7. It depends on which one releases first. So Shannon, you didn't travel down a secret passage this week, but I did.
Ooh, tell me about it, please.
It is okay. I have a lot of great opportunities for secret passages because I am addicted to TikTok, and sometimes I end up on some really weird kind of like conspiracy TikTok, that kind of thing. But it was this, I can't remember the creator, but she will share like weird stories. And I guess there was a very, very popular TikTok creator that messaged her a story that she requested that she remain anonymous. And the woman, the creator, the one who submitted the story, we'll just call her TikTok girl. She had, so in her story, she was describing like being at this party that she was really, or at some sort of event, and that her really good friend was a model, and they were at a bar, like at the sort of like after party, and a very, very household name, super famous actor gave her the model, the TikTok girl, was chatting with her, asked her if she what her Instagram was, all this kind of thing. And then as the model and TikTok girl were leaving, the TikTok girl got a DM from the famous actor saying, "Hey, if you want to go to another party, you know, uh, come meet me at my house." Da, da, da. Long story short, because this could go on forever, the TikTok girl goes and meets up with the famous actor, ends up just in this kind of like very just odd, very Bret Easton Ellis kind of party situation where everyone was just rich and bored in his house. And then he like took her to his garage where he's got all these vehicles. And they get into like this, the back of like this suburban type, not a suburban, like an Escalade or something. And they ended up driving like through this tunnel for a good long time, ended up in someone else's kind of garage at this fucked up party where weird, messed up things were happening. The girl just did
Whoa.
not want to be a part of it anymore, asked to leave. They leave. She's given back her cell phone. She had to sign an NDA, and she was just left at a gas station, and they were like, bye, and she had to call her own Uber. She didn't know where she was. The Uber arrived. When she went on Instagram, the celebrity had already blocked her. The thing that's weird, because this is like, we're in a time where 10 years ago I would have been like, yeah, right. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Now with this Epstein shit and the Diddy shit, I I don't know, dude. Some crazy things are going on. And the creator that I follow that tells these stories was like, listen, maybe it's not true. Maybe it's a lie. She's like, accept that this is a really big, big TikTok creator.
Wow.
And yeah, some people are theorizing that the actor is Leonardo DiCaprio
Well,
because
wasn't
of,
he a Diddy person too?
yeah,
Tim went to school with him.
went to school with DiCaprio.
Yeah. And I think
Really?
that Tim's cousin Josh pantsed him or something. But uh, yeah, I mean, honestly, like, didn't Kubrick write Eyes Wide Shut, or wasn't Eyes Wide Shut kind of about this, like weird rich people Hollywood parties?
Yeah, yes,
Mm.
I think so. And the thing that really stands out to me in all these scenarios is there is a degree of wealth and power that I just feel like you just kind of stop. I don't know, you're not satisfied by normal things. I don't, that's not fair, because I do think that there are a number of celebrities that have managed to stay, like, to remain kind of down to earth.
Mhm.
But it does seem that there is just this sort of like depersonalization, dehumanization thing that happens to you when you've been handed everything. But also, I don't know, there is this kind of Faustian deal with the devil type thing that I feel like happens too. I don't know. I read, or I listened to that creator, and my mind just went to this stuff where I'm like questioning everything, like these, celebrities that are like leaving the country and stuff. I think like Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher are like moving. And there's this whole thing about like the Diddy list and Epstein list. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't know. I don't want to sound like a total conspiracy theorist, but it just was like a thing with like that creator who kind of reported on the story, going like, it could be a lie, except that this is a huge creator on TikTok, and just really want. I think it was a few years ago that this happened. That the girl was just like, I feel like I have to, kind of say something. I have to stay anonymous, but this shit happened, you know.
Yeah.
So it's so weird. But
Well, there's enough
speaking,
evidence that it does. I mean,
that's the
yeah.
thing. That
Yeah.
is the thing, like you think that something's BS, and then shit starts to come out, and you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this seems so crazy. And then it's also that thing of like, I don't know, man, I believe anything now.
Well, right.
Maybe you.
People are capable of all kinds of
Oh,
things.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry. I apologize.
a doggy eruption.
They are outraged at these accusations. They're both huge Leonardo DiCaprio fans. They don't want me to say anything bad about him. But I was going to say, like, the kind of idea of the Faustian bargain brings us to the first movie that we will discuss. Um, the substance. And I should say, I should preface all of this by saying that if anyone has not seen the substance and doesn't want it spoiled for them and doesn't want to listen to a discussion about it, they should probably turn off the podcast now, go see it, and then come back.
Yes.
Same thing with Promising Young Woman, which is an older movie, came out in 2020. Promising Young Woman. And same thing with that one. If you haven't seen it, you want to see it, you don't want it spoiled for you, then go watch it and come back, because these movies will be discussed in great detail. With that said, how did you feel about the substance, Shannon?
Well, I'm not the world's biggest fan of body horror. Um, my experience, like emotionally, physically, viscerally was, like just kind of um it came with such force. I felt like it was beautiful in terms of the style. Like it was a feast for the eyes. It was um, reminded me, it made me think about how film is a visual medium and how easy it is to forget that sometimes.
Yeah,
And so I thought it was really cool in terms of the style. I felt tired and sick after watching it. Um, but I think it's definitely, there's so much to talk about with this movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um, I'm gonna go ahead and give like a little explanation of the movie for those that have not seen it but don't really want to watch it but want to hear a discussion.
great.
I'm one of those people, by the way. I was like, oh, who's gonna want to do that? I'm like, oh, I do it all the time. I like I said, I'm a total lurker on TikTok, and I follow a lot of movie accounts. And there's one account where she spoils the movie for you. I guess there's plenty of people out there that are like, just spoil it for me. Don't know when I'm gonna get around to watching it. Um, but okay, The Substance, released in 2024. It was written and directed by Coralie Fargia on a budget of 17.5 million. The movie stars Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. And the movie received the Palme d'Or for Best Screenplay at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival. So that's a little kind of just nuts and bolts of the movie. And then the plot. So Demi Moore plays Elizabeth Sparkle, who is a famous celebrity, hugely famous. In the movie, um, there's mention of the fact that she's won an Academy Award or something, her character. But at this point in the story, when we open, she is a famous aerobics personality, I guess is how you describe it. It's a morning show, starring her, and she's leading people through an aerobics routine. Everyone's dressed in 80s attire. And the way that the aerobics show is filmed is very sexualized, very focused on Elizabeth Sparkle being sexy and desirable, and the people around her also being attractive. Then in the movie, she finishes up, she heads down a hallway, goes to the restroom, but it's closed for repairs, it's out of order. So she sneaks into the men's restroom and goes into the stall. And that is when we're introduced to Frank. I believe his name is, no, Harvey. His name is
Oh
Harvey.
yeah.
Dennis Quaid playing Harvey. And Harvey is this very over the top her boss basically comes in and he's on the phone and he's yelling into the phone, and he's there taking a leak and yelling that they need to replace Elizabeth Sparkle, that she's old. In the movie, she plays like 50, like she's 50 years old. And the funny thing is Demi Moore is in her 60s.
I know.
Absolutely gorgeous woman. And she's so great. But so Harvey is, of course, just blasting her, just insulting her and saying, she's basically useless. She's old. We need to replace her with somebody younger. And then that is when we know that she's won an Oscar, because he says something about the fact that, like, it doesn't matter. She's no longer useful. And then he leaves. And then we see Elizabeth Sparkle come out of the bathroom, and she looks at her reflection, and she is just absolutely devastated. And then when she gets this news, and she leaves and goes home, she gets into a terrible car accident. She is luckily not really injured. She goes to the doctor to get herself checked out. They tell her that you just have like a couple of bumps, but you got lucky. By the way, happy birthday. That day happens to be her 50th birthday. And it's at this point that one of the people in the, I want to say like maybe a male nurse, who's very pretty, like very handsome. He says, "Hey, let me check something else out." And he's like feeling her spine. She's confused by this. And he says, "Perfect." And then this becomes important later. He wishes her a happy birthday. He leaves. At this point, I should add that she's very emotional about the fact that it's her birthday. She's crying when the doctor tells her happy birthday. And that is, I think, sort of in reaction to that, the nurse stays with her because the doctor leaves the room uncomfortable. The nurse checks out her spine, and then wishes her a happy birthday. And when she leaves, in her pocket is a flash drive, and it says "The Substance" on it. And wrapped around it is a piece of paper that says "It changed my life."
Oh, remember?
And
Sorry, I'm just gonna.
go ahead.
It's interesting. You reminded me that he was in the room watching her, and he saw her reaction to the birthday
Yeah,
comment, and um, he said when he was touching her spine, he said, "Oh, you're a good candidate, or you're a perfect candidate," or something like that,
yes,
right? And
yes,
so I didn't put that together the first time I watched it, that he kind of could see, her being, being upset about aging or something, yeah.
yeah,
And then he, went for it.
yeah. And of course it ends up being, it makes you wonder. I mean, also looking back on it, uh, it seems like an act of kindness
Mm.
slipping her the flash drive,
Mm-hmm.
and it ends up being the worst thing that ever could have happened to her.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um, and then uh, I'm just sort of like trying to be detailed about these like key certain parts in the plot. Um, because they'll come back later.
It's
But
great.
when she sees the flash drive and she sees the note, at that point she's interrupted by this gentleman that walks up and recognizes her, and he's just a sort of ordinary older man, um, who tells her that she's, he had gone to school with her, at high school with her. It's like, "You're still as beautiful as ever, and you're so great." And he asks if she'd be interested in getting together for a drink sometime, and you know, and so she takes his number down. He gives her his number, and he's very he's very very shy and awkward. You can tell that he is just struck by um, seeing Elizabeth again, and and that she is just so beautiful and has made such a success of her life. Opposite reaction of Harvey, who's roughly the same age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Opposite reaction. It's just this ordinary guy, and he gives her his number, and she leaves and goes home. And when she is, essentially fired from the show, the Elizabeth Sparkle show, uh, she goes home and she's very upset, and she ends up watching the Substance. She puts in the flash drive and sees basically the advertisement for the Substance, which is this kind of very flashy, almost very straightforward kind of ad. It shows like a single egg, and the yolk is split into two yolks, but it's the same, right? But it's just split into, and it says you are one, and uh, it gives the breakdown. Every 7 days, your kind of idealized version of yourself goes out in the world and does the thing, does whatever, comes back, rests. Your matrix, which is like the primary person, so that would be like Elizabeth would be the matrix, would then have a week, and then so every 7 days trading off, and so that is the thing, and it's very creepy. She calls the number on the thing, and it's just this very gruff, kind of emotionless male voice, telling her, asking for her address, uh, and then telling her, like having her write down this other address, and then she has to go pick up. They mail her like basically a key, and then she goes to this creepy, dirty alleyway through this, following this labyrinth thing kind of thing down to like a lockbox that has a kit with the Substance. And she goes home, and then that is when all hell breaks loose. She follows the instructions. It's very, very grotesque, the way that her body just kind of, basically, she gives birth through her spine, basically, to a fully formed, absolutely beautiful Margaret Wally, who goes by the name Sue. And this is where where the body horror just really kicks in. And Sue comes out, checks herself out, ends up having to sew up the wound in Elizabeth's back, which she does a really bizarre job of doing it. Like the way she was, I was like, there's a better way, there's an easier way of stitching her back up. And uh, and leaves her on the floor in the bathroom, which is so interesting. She just leaves her, and plugs, like there's a whole kind of system that I don't think is super important to cover, but there's a system in place for making sure that the matrix stays fed, and that they switch off basically. And Sue goes on and takes over Elizabeth, replaces Elizabeth as the new face of this aerobics kind of empire, which in this universe is really popular. And then it becomes this kind of situation where Sue does not respect the fact that they are one.
The balance.
And she's disrupting the balance, forgetting that she and Elizabeth are the same person, and there is resentment that grows between the two, and all by disrupting the balance, there is problems that come up for Sue. And meanwhile, Elizabeth is is sort of prematurely aging as this continues, and it gets grosser and grosser and weirder with Sue leaving a huge mess in the house, and Elizabeth cleaning up after her, and then Elizabeth leaving a huge gross mess with food and Sue having to clean up after her. And then finally, it reaches a point where Elizabeth, who is now like just a crone, just an old crone, calls the Substance hotline and requests that this stop. And in doing so, she, while Sue is in her rest cycle, she hits her in the heart with a syringe, empties it, and then suddenly panics and goes and gets the activator, which you cannot do because it is like it's a one-time use only. But again, it's just one of the many rules that both of them keep breaking. And by reactivating her, Sue comes back to life, goes crazy, kills Elizabeth Sparkle, and then goes to this huge New Year's event, televised live event that she's supposed to be hosting. And then at that point, she starts to fall apart, like literally her teeth fall out. She goes back home, or no, it's at this point. She tries to react. She goes home.
She gets more spinal fluid, I think.
Yeah, gets more of the fluid to feed herself, reactivate, like to try and help her. Oh, she wants to start the whole process over again, and in doing so becomes this really gross Sue Elizabeth. I think they call it Ella Sue monster.
Oh yeah, they call it Elizabeth. What they call it?
Ella Sue, isn't it?
Monstro Eliza Sue.
Yeah, and it is. At this point, it's you've got this monster that has Elizabeth Sparkle's face in this frozen smile with her eyes moving around on like her back, and then she's got like everything is just distorted, and she's wearing this fluffy blue party dress, and she goes back to the studio, walks out on stage. People are horrified, and they're horrified, and she is like, no, it's me, and then they're like, kill the monster. Somebody comes and like hits her in the head, like 'cause they're freaked out, and she just starts like her head just sort of explodes and just blood just flies all over everybody. And the movie ends with her basically coming apart as she's like running down the hall and running down what I'm guessing is like Hollywood Boulevard. And then she just splatters to the ground. And then the Elizabeth Sparkle face just sort of like almost like a starfish, just like squiggles and crawls all the way to her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and just lays there and looks up into the sky at the stars until she is just sort of burns out. And then the movie ends with her star, like somebody like a street cleaner going over her star. And so that is the long and short of it. Hope that wasn't too boring a retelling, but yeah, that is the Substance. I know it is encountered quite a bit of controversy. I mean, there's people that really, really love this movie, and then others that really don't think it has any substance at all. But after watching it, I found myself really just, I thought this is definitely worth talking about. It is a very deliberate movie. I mean, the filmmaker really had a lot to say. It was clear, um, and I think it's great that we are at a time when there's just a lot of scholarship about horror, the horror genre in cinema. And you studied film,
Mm-hmm.
and you actually took a class with. I'll never forget buying Men, Women, and Chainsaws while like at a bookstore in Berkeley. And just, I loved that book. And I felt validated because I loved the horror genre so much. And a lot of people just sort of like, just didn't think of it as worthy of anything except just, it's like, oh, it's just gross. It's just like thrill seeking. Like they just want, that there was no value. I'm like, no, there's a lot of value. There's a lot of value. And then I found that book, and the woman was your professor, right?
Yes, Carol
Oh,
Clover. Yeah, it was an awesome class. It was really, she's a great teacher, and that book is great. And yeah, it's a genre that often gets like, it's got like a, what can, how do we talk about that? Like lower,
lowbrow, kind
lowbrow.
of.
Yeah, it's considered kind of a lowbrow genre, but we know that's not true.
No, I mean, the great thing about horror is that it provides a like social and cultural commentary in this like really subversive way. Um, that like it's funny because just to kind of go back to like we talked about the absurd in one of the episodes we did before. And the great thing about the absurd, I think, is like if you look at the absurd through like a lens of metaphor, it actually makes things make more sense
Yeah.
in a way. You know what I mean? And I feel like in this movie, it's very in your face, and you're definitely seeing in this kind of grotesque, disturbing way uh, the point that the filmmaker is trying to make about the male gaze, about women losing value when they age, about our relationship to ourselves as women, trying desperately to, feel loved, and uh, feeling that our value is gone when we are no longer appealing to men. And I'm not saying that in like absolute terms, but like there's definitely plenty of evidence that women have struggled long and hard in entertainment
Yeah.
as they've gotten older. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think um, that one of the things that stood out to me were a lot of kind of motifs. And similarly, in the next movie we're going to be discussing, there's quite a few kind of interesting motifs that come up, and one of them is how both Elizabeth and Sue wear the same yellow coat uh,
Mm-hmm.
in the movie when they leave the house, and it's funny because it's really the only thing that they share in terms of clothing, because I think Sue has she has her own style and her own wardrobe that she wears that is different than Demi Moore's character because she's younger. But they wear the same coat. They share the same coat when they go out, and it's yellow, which I think is referencing the yolk, and that it's the same but split in two.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of splitting and the kind of duality, that they experience. There is who like Elizabeth Sparkle is, and who Elizabeth Sparkle wants to be, and then the two ultimately turn on each other. And you think about the kind of the way that we as women are sometimes fighting with ourselves, fighting with our own bodies, fighting with our own skin, fighting with our own um, kind of way, like that we kind of our presentation to the world. Uh,
I think they were saying too during, I think that was one of the taglines from the product, from the substance, was "You are one, you can't escape from yourself." And like so much was about like a self divided, like actually divided. I wasn't even clear whether they intended for us to think they shared a consciousness. At first I thought they did, but then it became pretty clear that they didn't, at least in my
no,
interpretation.
because they would always be surprised by what the other had done.
Yes. And then, as much so this it's interesting because this film was so much about like anger turned inward, and the
Yes.
other one was so much about anger turned outward. But it's interesting, this filmmaker's first film was Revenge, which was
Right.
a rape revenge film. But this was really internal. It totally felt claustrophobic to me and autistic.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there was like from the opening, with first of all, let's talk about how it references like, well, you know that I am a sucker for the Gothic, and I just really noticed a lot of Gothic elements in the movie. Um, and for those of you that aren't familiar with what the Gothic genre is, it is often seen as a push away from the Enlightenment. So, around the 17th to 18th century, the Enlightenment was focused a lot on things like reason and rationale, and the Gothic was more concerned with like darker aspects of human nature, the irrational, grotesque, uh, the weird, mysterious, um, and so Gothic elements that you'll kind of see are like um, um, things like dark like castles, like corridors, like hallways, like secret passages.
Well,
Like
Frankenstein was Gothic, yeah?
what's that? Frankenstein is
Frankenstein.
perfect example of the Gothic. It
Yeah.
is you'll see things like a lot of like mankind's hubris, like Dr. Frankenstein making the monster, and then the monster seems to be more human than its maker, right? Who was
Hmm.
human. So there's a lot of like kind of like these blurred lines between like what is human, what is monster. Um, things like apparitions, ghosts. Um, you'll see a lot of it. The Gothic plays with a lot of things with gender. It plays with a lot of things like yeah, man machine. And for example, I took the Gothic in college, and there was a student. She wrote this great paper. Her name was Allison. And Allison wrote this amazing paper on Blade Runner and on the Gothic elements in Blade Runner. And that's like a perfect example because you can like call back to like Frankenstein. It's like replicant versus human. At what point are we human? At what point, like what makes a human?
Hmm.
Um, and then of course things like the grotesque, like the grotesque is a big thing as well. And so in this movie, I noticed there's a lot of like corridors come up quite a bit. There's the corridor in the studio, which also I feel like is kind of like there's a shout out to The Shining because of the carpet. Also
Hmm.
the bathroom at
And
work,
the blood spray.
the blood spray, especially at the end where it hits the lens. Yeah. Um, but there's, it gets confusing because with Elizabeth's, fancy penthouse apartment, it just like her it's hard to even I'm like, how big is her apartment? There's these long hallways, and then there's like the hidden, which is another very Gothic element. Like Sue breaks like uh open the wall in the bathroom and puts uh Elizabeth in there to hide her. um So like you could almost say that kind of brings to mind like ideas of shame around who we are, right? Like around Elizabeth's shame around aging and her
Hmm.
feeling of like uh, her lack of value. But then there's also the internal struggle of wanting to be who you are, which is kind of like what she ends up like trying to take her power back, and then seeing that specter like out the window of how beautiful Sue is in on the billboard. So there's
Hmm.
this specter that's always looking at them. There's the Elizabeth specter that Sue sees like hanging on the wall in the house, and then there's the Sue specter that Elizabeth is confronted with, looking at her through this window, and then she regrets her decision. So I feel like it also, like a lot of the Gothic elements in this really kind of illustrate um, our own kind of like a very kind of graphic depiction of uh, our kind of interior struggle, like as women, and also the lengths and the pain that we will endure to be beautiful. I mean, look at the friggin' Kardashians. Like, have you ever gone and looked at what they used to look like?
Oh gosh, no.
Dude, it will blow your mind if you look at Kim Kardashian and like what she looked like going back to like the very early days of keeping Kardashians. If you look at Chloe, if you look at Courtney, Kylie Jenner, it's they have had they don't look like who they were. And the funny thing is who they were was not ugly at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there
Mm-hmm.
was nothing to change. But then I will say that's the crazy thing with Elizabeth is she was she was beautiful. She
Yeah.
was just 50, you know, and it's just that pressure to keep up. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a very relevant movie. I mean, you just look around now. We look at these. It's like Brave New World, you know. I mean, you can look like a completely different person. But then, what does that mean? You know?
Yeah. Well, it's God, what stood out to me was, we get rewarded and it gets reinforced, that you get things for looking a certain way. And
Hmm.
yeah, there's like we do some gruesome things to ourselves to achieve that. Like we starve ourselves, we
Yeah,
go under the knife, we get things injected into our faces. Um, and it's all in this attempt to avoid like hard feelings and,
yeah,
a reality. Um, and that movie felt, there are lots of people online talking about it and how cathartic it felt for them. But to me, it was just like incredibly tragic. Because she doesn't make any meaningful change internally.
no,
It's like all about her avoiding and so like when we've talked about this ahead of time, I don't want to derail the conversation too much, but like it made more sense to me to see this as like addiction in a way versus like because of the way she was selling herself out in the film. Like in order to keep Sue alive and young, she had to be moderate. She had to like, take her turn. She had to only take a certain amount of spinal fluid, but she was so high on it, like all the rewards, all the attention. She just kept going and kept going and kept going. I kept thinking of like how she was, selling her future self out to get that little bit of a high of being the hot young it girl. And um it was so repetitive over and over and over, and I was like so exhausted by the end. um and as she was doing it, uh it's like it's sort of like there was no it just felt so much like smoking crack or something, and for what? Like she went right back to the same awful situation at work with the same horrible boss who was so disgusting. By the way, I feel like there could have been a better casting job with the Dennis Quaid uh, actor. I mean, with Dennis Quaid, I think somebody else could have played that part really much better. Do you want
who
to know
do
who?
you? Yeah, tell me.
Jesse Plemons.
You know how much, but the problem
Just
is
kidding. I'm just kidding.
Poochie, just his eyes lit up, his great big glassy eyes lit up because Poochie is a huge Jesse Plemons fan, as we know.
Tim wanted me to say that. Um, he wants me to insert a Jesse Plemons joke into every episode.
I'm here for it. Poochie thinks that Jesse Plemons could have played both the Sue and the Elizabeth Sparkle role, but also Poochie thinks that Jesse Plemons could have beat Jake Paul in the fight. Poochie has a very unrealistic kind of perception of Jesse Plemons. That's
Yeah.
the joke here, is that he's obsessed with Jesse. But no,
Yeah.
who do you think could have played that role better?
No one. I thought he was perfect. It was
Oh,
only
okay.
we were just trying to think of a way to
You
get.
were just setting me up because I
I
started to
was.
really think. I was like, who would do it? Um, uh, it's funny because when you talk about addiction, it also it fits so well because that crazy wealthy socialite Jocelyn, I can't remember her, the cat lady.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Okay, so and here's the point. It's like you could make the argument, and I feel so bad saying this because I don't want to say anything terrible except that it's like we're all in on the joke and she's not. Do you know what I'm saying? Because she insists that she never had work done. She
Oh,
insists still that she never had work done. And we all kind of go, okay, Jocelyn, sure. Like we all know. But here's this wealthy woman who was probably perfectly attractive. I have no way. I don't know what she looked like. But like, it's never enough. She keeps going. It's never enough
it reminds me
yet.
of like that dysmorphia thing, like where you just cannot see yourself accurately.
Yeah, and I think you could make the argument she's addicted to the
Mm-hmm.
surgeries. She's
Yeah.
addicted to it. And it's like it's never enough. She's got all the money in the world and she has status. I mean, she's a socialite, but she just keeps doing this. And there's clearly shame because she won't admit to it,
It's
you
yeah, and
know?
it's like there's this whole thing about like the avoidance of, oh gosh, Ginger's in here scratching. Sorry if you can hear that. Ginger, chill out. Our dogs. Maybe they should have their
I
own
know.
podcast.
They should. It would just be whining and scratching.
So like the thing that was I kept thinking about was like the true violence, that we do to ourselves is to sort of tell ourselves like I have to get rid of this thing I'm feeling, or like
Hmm.
I shouldn't be feeling this, and to like change our state, and then to be right. It's just a way of not being able to be with like the present and with the realities of our lives, which is terrifying. I think it's terrifying to age. Aging is terrifying. Your body literally falls apart. You start to sag, you wrinkle up, and I was never taught by anyone how to do that with any, well, my therapists and my spiritual teachers have helped me with that, and my
Sure.
friends, but it's a terribly overwhelming experience, and especially when you're like, for your instance, like your career depends on looking a certain way.
Oh, dude, I mean, it's funny for anyone that wants to say that the substance is like that, basically that women aren't held to these weird standards. Dude, so I turned 52 in September, and I posted, a picture about just being grateful to be 52, because not everybody gets to reach fucking 52 years of age,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some fan, I use the term fan loosely, um,
Some critic.
respond, yeah, responded to it saying, well, you're really old, but still fuckable.
Ugh.
And I think I replied with something like, I don't have a problem with it. Like, I don't, there is no but,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And then he goes, well, I'm 54. And I'm like, oh my goodness. He like didn't get it. And the thing is I don't even think he was trying to insult me. I think that he's like, well, your business is made with your body. I can say whatever I want
Mm-hmm.
about it. And, yeah, he can. I mean, I do put myself out there as, I'm in adult films and naked all over the internet and some, but there is a kind of ownership that some audiences feel. and not just for adult performers, but for anyone, for models, for actresses, and certainly in the Substance, they are there for public consumption, and are sort of evaluated like pieces of meat, which again kind of calls back to the beginning of the movie when someone drops the hamburger on Elizabeth Sparkle's star on the Walk of Fame, and then kind of like just leaves it. And then the end of the movie when she is just a piece of meat on her star that is, you know, shriveled up and then cleaned away, just like in the beginning of the movie.
That just
It
is
is,
just
it is, the that is kind of, there's this the cost to benefit ratio, I guess. You see Elizabeth, she's beautiful. At 50, she's beautiful. She's clearly rich. She lives in this beautiful penthouse apartment, but her whole life has been about being the pinnacle of youth and beauty. And when she can no longer be that, she doesn't know what else to be, you
right, or
know?
how to get there. Like, I know that was such a good way of sort of symbolizing the ephemeral nature of being an actor in Hollywood, and like, but also like of life. That we do actually just disintegrate into nothing.
Yeah,
And that's the whole thing that I felt like this is the fundamental. There's just a fundamental restlessness to our existence as humans, and like death avoidance is something we all do. It's like it's terrifying to think about not existing anymore. And we do a lot of things to avoid that, and it wrecks our lives. But there's not
yeah,
a lot of like guidance out there or help, or even like it's actively hostile, in your field and in within the Hollywood to 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 embody that, or to just be a real human who
right.
ages and dies. It's I mean, although more now, I mean, I think more now, there's more acceptance of that now.
Well,
There's
yeah, no, no,
mm,
we are like, there's absolutely discussion. There's honestly never been a better time to be able to, you know, make these pieces of art and be able to have an open dialogue about
yeah.
them.
Like menopause is like so hot right now.
But it's about fucking time, dude.
I
It is
know.
fucking hard to deal with.
I told you about how I
Yeah,
went to my doctor that one time, and I was like, I was hitting perimenopause really early. And she
yeah,
looked at me and she's all, "So what's the goal here? You want to keep it open for business?" And I was like, "It closes for business?" Like, nobody told me what happens to your like body parts as you age. And uh, it's just, yeah, it's about time.
yeah. It's still like this mystery, and it's funny because I remember turning 40 and sitting in my OBGYN's office. My OBGYN looked like John Cryer, by the way, like exactly like John Cryer. It was so weird.
Oh
I'm
my
like, hey,
God, I would
Ducky.
love to have a ducky
Yeah.
OBGYN.
Um, but I remember saying like, hey, so should we start talking about menopause? And he just made it clear. He's like, I mean, I don't know when I mean, it could happen now. It could happen in 10 years. It could happen in 15 years. Like it comes when it comes. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that's comforting. So yeah, like there's a lot that we can discuss. Would you say this is a feminist movie?
You know, uh, uh, definitely. Um, I want to read you something that I found that in this Reddit um,
Okay.
thread. It's really cool. This person had a lot to say.
Oh, great.
User VXF111. Um, so they're talking. There's a big long post, but this is just part of it. So Monstro Eliza Sue is just an amalgamation of body parts. It's so in your face and unabashed. The end is seriously like, you like tits? You want tits? Here's another one for you. It makes things so sexual that they become completely unsexual, and all the nudity is presented in the most clinical settings against a white tiled bathroom.
Yeah.
I've seen people say that they feel like this film falls into presenting the male gaze, and I think that's missing the point. It's about letting the audience reject the male gaze in a way Elizabeth never really is able to. It's wildly effective. I see why this won a screenplay award at Cannes. It's not only audacious and original, but it has a POV that is largely absent from the genre and really deserves to be represented. What do you think about that?
I think that makes a great point. It was one of the things, it's funny, I meant to say too, like the grotesque elements are heightened against the very symmetric, sterile kind of backdrop.
Yeah.
Um, and also the way that food is always depicted as gross.
Yeah.
You never see
Ugh.
what, yeah, you never see women eating it, except for when Elizabeth Sparkle is like completely just falling apart and cooking and just she's trying to destroy herself. She's reacting. She's so angry, which you see also like this violence toward the self. The only real violence in the movie is when Sue beats the shit out of Elizabeth, like kills her basically. And then there's that part where she's holding on to the back of Elizabeth's head and slamming her face repeatedly into her own reflection in the mirror.
God, it so reminds me of, it's so pervasive, and not just in women, but like in the West, I think, this whole self-hatred thing. Um, but women do it well and frequently, and there are a lot of reasons for that. We have these impossible standards we're supposed to measure up to, but there is a way that we really just, and I think they really drive that point home, right? Like, you're one, you can't escape from yourself. And
Right.
that whole thing she kept saying at the end of her Sue kept saying at the end of her sessions, her exercise show, she'd say, and in the meantime, take care of yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it's like at work when people say, yeah, oh no, take time off if you need it. And they say that, but it's like, no, if you take time off, people think you're lazy and they, resent you. I feel like that thing of like, take care of yourself. And I just kept thinking, how? And like, where are we ever taught to do that? And
Well, no, it's the take care of yourself. It's the self care. It's the
right.
destruction couched in self care. You know,
Yes.
that the toxic positivity.
Yes. Like,
Um,
take care of yourself so that you look good for, you know.
it's you know what else I just something dawned on me, and that is so we when we talk about the like impossible standards of beauty, right?
Mhm.
How interesting it is that the voice, the faceless kind of like the voice, is a male voice that
Mhm.
is giving the instructions for the substance
Yeah.
and setting the impossible standard. It's this man's voice setting the impossible standard. Hey, don't forget, remember you were one. There was nowhere to go but to fail because they weren't one.
They
So they
weren't
can't be
one.
one. They were not one, but they're supposed to be one. It's a what is the not a paradox? It's a it's yeah they she's set up to fail. You are one, remember you are one, but we're not one. We don't have the same consciousness. We don't even know what the other is doing except to look at the evidence. Yet that expectation is set by this male voice.
It
um
sort of reminded, for me, that was, I really went to, like, in my mind, I went to how impossible it is to, like, the way I think about addiction or alcohol or something. Like, I feel like anybody with enough exposure is going to get addicted. And
yeah,
so, like, it that's, again, like the transformation that needed to happen was an internal transformation that involves, like, not avoiding reality.
exactly.
But what happens is, it's so compelling. Like, why, if someone had told me that there was a fountain of youth and all I had to do was a couple things, it is addictive. It's like, to avoid, if you can. Yeah, in order to keep herself alive, she would have had to be respectful of the balance. She would have had to, like, deal with those urges, go in a closet for 7 days, treat herself well, her other self well. But immediately she was hostile toward Elizabeth. Sue was. almost
Yeah.
immediately. Um, and for me, that really did capture like the internal hostility we
Hmm.
feel toward each other, and ourselves and each other. Like, I feel like we were talking about the male gaze. I was like, what's worse? Like, are men looking at us in a way that's more destructive than the way other women size us up and look at us? So I'm not saying all women, but you know, in
No,
some
but
way,
like this sort of calls back to when we were talking before about like the Reddit snark community tends
yeah,
to be women, predominantly women. I don't think I've ever actually seen a man in the snark community when
yeah,
it's about, like Jenna Jameson, Sydney Adams, Emily Maliko. It's other women. Um, Now you could so you could make, perhaps there's an argument to be made, maybe, that it is a kind of patriarchal kind of construct to pit women against each other,
mm-hmm,
or to suggest that, I don't know, there's limited resources and the women are going to have to fight each other for them. Um, but
yeah.
uh,
Let's
but
be
I mean, I don't.
adopt.
I hate saying that because I don't want to say that all men are like that, because clearly, like, you see the dude that was very kind, and it's heartbreaking because he
Yeah,
in the movie he's like, he's so excited to meet her for a drink,
yeah,
but can't deal with she can't deal with the fact that he accepts her for who she is. Like, he
yeah,
tells her she looks beautiful. He's not telling her she's old and worthless. He tells her she's beautiful, and he's very
yeah,
vulnerable with her. He's like, "Oh, don't look at my cholesterol; it's off the charts." But he's self-deprecating.
yeah,
But it's like being attracted to the narcissist because the narcissist is larger than life, and I guess that's Harvey is, and he's also her boss and all that. I was going to say, she's bending over backward for to be valuable, um, to fit into, to be the star, in the male gaze.
yeah. And I
And
think that's like totally like it does what it does really well as a
yeah,
movie. Like, but I remember I feel like, and I always love like a transformation, and there just was. I mean, there was definitely a transformation, but I'd always love, like, there was no kind of
resolution.
learning unless you in the end, I have a friend whose email addresses die before you die. um
Yeah,
and in the end, maybe she does, like, she comes to a place after this brutality toward herself. Maybe she does just stare up at the stars and becomes one with them, and kind of, you know that's how she's set free. I mean, a lot of people speculate, or, I've heard people talk about Marilyn Monroe's suicide as a way of reclaiming herself and her body. Um, so it just made me think about that, because she did look kind of serene as that face blob,
yeah.
right? Or
It
no?
is. Well, so I felt like, by ending up on her star, looking
Hmm.
up at the star. So it's funny. So she's on, her Walk of Fame constructed star, looking up at organic stars. And I'd like to think that, I mean, I think it's probably open for discussion, or, it's, something to consider, that she gets to look up into something organic as she passes and
Hmm.
becomes, one with nature or the
Hmm.
universe or whatever, and her, you know, um, but yeah, it is. I sat and watched that movie, and I was really like, I couldn't really talk or do anything for a little bit after it ended. But I
Hmm.
did right away afterwards, for some reason. I was like, I mean, aside from going like, "Oh my gosh, Anna, we gotta talk about this. We gotta do this." But Promising Young Woman, which is also another feminist movie written and directed by a woman. Uh, Very different kind of movie, but definitely has something to say about sort of uh, uh, women and men, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, so what did you think of Promising Young Woman?
Well, I am a huge fan of the subgenre rape revenge. I thought it was super cathartic. I love what's her face, the actress. What's her name?
Carrie Mulligan?
Carrie Mulligan. Oh my gosh, I just love her. I could look. She was like, I was spellbound by that performance. I thought she
Yeah,
was amazing. Yeah, and that what came to mind was that quote. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig two graves.
yeah,
Um, and I thought it was a lot about what also came to mind is like power and how like you don't fear power unless you've been like a helpless victim of power, and the whole like victim perpetrator bystander dynamic really came to mind. But I thought it was really well written, super entertaining, made me think of all my favorite rape revenge movies, but especially Ms. 45. Um, yeah.
it's interesting because unlike and I know that The Substance is a horror movie and Promising Young Woman is viewed more as like a black comedy, you know.
But so
Um,
fits to me, it totally feels like a horror movie, you know?
it's funny because the trailer definitely makes it seem like one.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
but
like thriller.
yes. Uh, what's interesting is like when you think about it, like, so this movie absolutely is a rape revenge movie, but what's so interesting is it is not there is no graphic violence like there is in like I Spit on Your Grave, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um uh it's it is, oh, I should probably just give a quick kind of a breakdown for those that have not seen it. So Promising Young Woman, I want to say it came out in 2020. I think it did, 2020. The movie follows Cassie. The movie actually opens with Cassie uh, passed out drunk in a bar, and she is really, really just inebriated and doesn't barely knows where she is. And there's a group of men, group of young guys. One of them being Adam Brody. I think Adam Brody is cute.
Oh, I did
Um,
not even recognize him in it.
Yeah, yeah, he was, I was an Adam Brody fan. Um,
Oh, Adam Brody.
yeah, he's the cutie that like goes over to her and is like trying to help her out. And yeah, his friends are like,
Oh,
they're all kind of making,
yeah.
yeah, they're
Sorry.
all kind of, no, it's okay. They're kind of making fun of her. They're like, it's girls like end up in situations like that and then wonder why bad shit happens or whatever. And then Adam Brody is sort of like kind of pushed by his friends to like go over and like talk to her. And then it turns into this whole thing where she's, can barely hold it together. He takes her to his place and she's like passed out on his bed and he starts to, essentially like remove her underwear and she says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And then she sits up and looks at him and goes, "What are you doing?" Completely stone cold sober. He freaks out. And that kind of opens the movie. And that is an introduction to sort of Cassie's MO, like what she does. She, by day, she works at a coffee shop and is a 30-year-old woman still living at home with her parents. And by night she goes out and essentially plays an inebriated woman and calls out these guys. Like she doesn't hurt them, but like she basically she sticks it to them,
She
and
kind of
calls
like
them.
teaches them lessons by turning the table on them, you
She
know?
turns the table, yeah, exactly, and she lets them know, like, there's she said there's other a lot of us out there, so maybe you shouldn't like bullshit like this and stuff. And each time, like, the guys are insisting that they're good guys,
Yeah.
right? I'm a good guy. I'm a good
Adam
guy.
Adam Brody seemed like he was in that conversation earlier in the night. And I was surprised that he turned.
That is,
Yeah.
and I think that that kind of is foreshadows what kind of happens
Mm-hmm.
eventually. But so it comes out that Cassie dropped out of medical school, that she had been an incredible student and really wanted to be a doctor, but something tragic happened and she dropped out of medical school. And then you find out that her best friend, Nina, had been raped at a party in medical school and had received no justice and just couldn't go on and ended up taking her own life. And prior to that, when she had this mental breakdown, Cassie had left school to help take care of her friends. So you really get a sense of how deep that friendship was. And then you learn later that they had been friends since childhood. And that they each had each other's kind of name on a necklace. Like it's a heart split in two, and Cassie wore Nina's and Nina had worn Cassie's. And Cassie's parents are like just really, they don't seem very with it. Jennifer Coolidge plays
Oh
her
God,
mom,
she's so good.
and in a very Jennifer Coolidge, just kind of like, I don't understand. You were doing so well, but the parents just don't quite, they just can't, they're not, they love their daughter, but they're just not clued in, and they're not super supportive of the fact she just doesn't, they're not trying to get her help.
Well,
They're
so,
just
yeah,
like,
that's the interesting thing, right? Like she's in a way, she's like so together. To me, she's like the Erin Brockovich of like rape revenge, right? Like super resilient, like
yeah,
like out for justice, but she's like living at home. It's like she's stunted. She's still, she's like stopped, and but she's not. It's an interesting little, they see her as kind of not well, but
yeah,
she seems very clear in her mission and very clear about what's important to her, and it's getting revenge. or
right.
not teaching people lessons. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not clear
Mm-hmm.
like what her end goal is, and
Mm-hmm.
they're. I mean, we end up discovering what happened. I don't think she could have anticipated what
Yeah.
happened, but she has a book that she just sort of checks off. She writes the name of the guy, and she sort of like checks off um, um, each time that she kind of does her thing with each of these kind of shitty guys.
She's doing
And
such important work, right? But it's not work you can get paid for.
no, she's just working her cafe job with Laverne Cox, who plays Gail. And Gail's a good friend to her, doesn't push her, like is very sweet, very kind to her. And then one day Ryan comes into the coffee shop, played by Bo Burnham, and he's very charming. And he had gone to medical school with Cassie, and Ryan went on to become like a pediatric surgeon. And she's resistant at first. Like she doesn't want to go out with him. Um, but she eventually just, really finds him to be charming and kind. And she lets herself open up, and they start dating. And around this time, she's still kind of doing her vigilante work. She goes and she actually meets up with someone from med school that was one of the people. It's played by Alison Brie. It's this character. The character's name is Madison, and she gets Madison drunk at a brunch, and is grilling Madison for kind of like, they get around to the topic of Nina and the fact that Madison uh, never stuck up for Nina. And Madison is insisting, well, these things happen, and she kind of got herself into that situation, which seems to be like the refrain, right?
Mm-hmm.
With like the female characters, that like, well, I mean, it was she was drunk. I mean, these things happen. And so what Cassie does is she sets up a situation where when Madison is super duper drunk, so drunk, and then she is hired, I guess a male actor, a male prostitute, maybe, I'm not sure, to take her up to a hotel room, uh, get her in bed, and then leave. So not to hurt her at all, but to make it where Madison wakes up without any recollection of what happened, but feeling like something happened. And then Madison, of course, is like just, spamming, like just calling Cassie repeatedly. Cassie won't take the call, leaving her messages. I don't know what happened. Like one minute I was, drinking with you and inside there was a guy and I woke up in a hotel room. I don't know what happened. And can you please tell me? And of course, Cassie just ignores the call. And also Cassie goes to the dean of the school and confronts her also about the fact that the dean never filed any charges against Al Monroe, who's the name of the guy that raped the main perpetrator. Was raped. And Dean Walker, played by Connor Britton, says the kind of thing that says what the judge said in the Groff Turner case, which was, I'm not going to ruin this guy's future over a mistake. Which I would not be surprised. I mean, I'm assuming that Emerald Fennell was thinking of Groff Turner with that quote,
Mm-hmm.
And Cassie at this point lets the dean know that oh yeah, well, your daughter, I met her, and she she's at a dorm, I'm not sure which one, with a bunch of guys. They look a lot older than her. She's pretty girl, looks a lot older than 17. But yeah, but I'm sure these guys are great. So because Cassie had tricked the dean's daughter into thinking that her favorite boy band was going to be playing at a certain spot. And the dean's losing her shit. She's like, I'm sorry, and then Cassie lets her know, no, I wouldn't do that. She's at this diner or whatever. She's sort of making unlike you, I wouldn't actually send your daughter into a dangerous situation, or unlike you, I wouldn't assume that a bunch of guys wouldn't have bad intentions,
Mm-hmm.
And so all this leads to Madison now sort of recognizing the error of her ways, shows up at Cassie's house with an old cell phone. And on that cell phone is video footage that had been sent around of the rape, of Nina's rape. And Madison lets her know, because Cassie's like, look, I'm sorry, nothing happened. Nothing happened. You didn't have sex with that guy. You weren't raped. Nothing happened. And then Madison's like, okay, well, listen, I feel like we should have this, and then she kind of is like, please don't ever contact me again, but leaves her the phone. And on the recording is Ryan, Cassie's boyfriend, watching the rape and reacting to it, kind of laughing about oh man, she is wasted, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Cassie can't believe it, goes to Ryan's work, he works in pediatrics, confronts him on it. He's like, look, nothing, he's basically insisting he's not a bad person. That was a long time ago. He didn't do anything, that whole thing. Cassie's like, tells him off. He never apologizes, just insists that he's a good person. And when she goes to leave, he just kind of as a parting shot tells her that she's a loser who dropped out of medical school. And, I forgot to mention, during this time, just prior to this realization, she goes to the lawyer's house, played by Alfred Molina. She goes to the lawyer's house that represented Al Monroe. And when he opens the door and he sees her, he tells her that he has known for some time that he was going to end up speaking to her. And he apologizes. He lets her know that he was instructed by his client, like basically it was his job to completely break Nina down to the point where she dropped all charges. And then he asks Cassie, "Are you going to hurt me?" And she says no. And he kneels at her feet, and apologizes. And when she leaves, there's a guy, like a thug, waiting out by her car. And he goes, "Do I go in now?" And she's like, "No, no."
That's so great.
So before she leaves Ryan's office, she demands to know Al Monroe's bachelor party, because Al Monroe's about to get married. And he's living the perfect life. He's a doctor. He's got this stunning fiance. And she demands to know where his bachelor party is taking place. And she threatens, "If you don't give me the information, I'm going to send this video to everyone that you know." So he gives her the information. And she goes to Al Monroe's bachelor party at this cabin, dressed as a nurse, as like a strippergram, like a bachelor party stripper nurse. And she goes into the house. Everyone's drunk. She does like a lap dance thingy. Then she says that she wants to go up to the room alone with him. He's like, "No, no, no, no. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that." And so you kind of wonder if Al Monroe somehow had some sort of a change, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought. I was like, "Oh, damn, maybe, just maybe." I mean, it's unforgivable. He raped a girl, but it's that thing of like, can people change? You know?
Yeah.
And she goes, "Look, I'm not going to get paid unless I at least go and like sit alone in a room with you." And so he leads her up to the bedroom, and he's like, "Okay, so like, is this okay? Like, we can go or whatever." And she goes, "No, let me just do like a dance, a lap dance thingy again." And he's like, "Okay, okay." And then she's like, I'm gonna have to handcuff you." And he goes, "No, don't do that." She goes, "No, look, sometimes these guys get handsy." And he's like, "All right." She puts the handcuffs on him and she confronts him. And he loses his shit. He insists that he's a good guy, that was a long time ago, all that kind of stuff. She pulls out like a little mini surgical kit, and she climbs on top of him and she wants to carve Nina's name into him. And uh, and then so she's there, and he manages to get one of his hands free, and he smothers her to death, and she dies, which was shocking. Did not know she was going to die, but she dies. And God bless Emerald Fennell for being able to find like levity, like comedic moments, because it is pretty funny when Al Monroe's friend Joe comes in, and that whole exchange is actually, despite the fact that, Cassie is like the greatest character ever, she's laying there dead, there is that funny exchange between Joe and Al. Can't remember everything that was said, but it's like Joe can't believe she's dead. And then, oh gosh, there's this great moment where when Al is handcuffed, and he's like, "Look, that was an accident. Like, it's every guy's worst nightmare." And Cassie says, "Oh, really? Can you imagine what every girl's worst nightmare is?" Amazing.
Good. Yeah.
But they get rid of the body. They burn her body. She is missing. And the parents, assume that maybe she just sort of like took off for a few days. Ryan says, he plays dumb. He's like, "Yeah, no, we were seeing each other, but I don't know what happened to her. She probably was having a mental breakdown. She seemed very unstable." And then all of a sudden, time passes, and uh, they're at the wedding. There's a wedding, and uh, all of a sudden, Alfred Molina receives a package in the mail, the attorney. And it says, if you've received this package, basically like, I am no longer living. And it has the phone with the recording in it, and basically everything that he would need to call the police. Police are called, they go to the cabin, they go and they find her, remains where they were burned. And at the wedding, police start showing up, like a fleet of police cars start showing up. Al is standing there, Joe is standing there, Ryan's phone beeps. And it's like a timed message to basically be sent days later. What is it called? A queue, like a message in Cassie's queue was sent. And it says, you really didn't think it was over, did you? And, you know, uh, enjoy the wedding. Love, Cassie and Nina, wink. And, and Al is taken away in handcuffs, and you can hear them say, you're charged with the murder of, Cassie, and I forgot her last name. And yeah, that's the long and the short of it. Um, but there's so much in this movie, dude. There's so much.
Mm-hmm.
What stood out to you?
Oh gosh. I think just oh god, there's so many things swirling around here. That she was trying to like the way she taught people, in
Yeah,
terms of like turning the tables on them, helping them to have an experience um that would trigger their empathy. Like with her friend at the lunch
yeah.
when she gets really drunk and she sets her up to think that she went to her hotel room with somebody and had sex with them without and didn't remember. Um, and how that was like her, it seemed like that was her real passion in life was to create these situations um, to teach people something. But then it sort of led her to getting to enact revenge on these people. Um, I I don't know. I think the main thing that I sort of left thinking about was like so the fact that her friend that Nina died, killed herself, right?
Right.
And that she ends up dying. I thought, it brought up this whole thing of like these things are survivable.
Yeah.
Um, they didn't survive them.
Right.
And that it was cathartic and funny, so funny, like the part about when they built that bonfire and they were burning her body, the two guys, and
Hmm.
just like the callousness,
Yeah.
and like kicking her hand into the fire. Her hand had kind of rolled out of the fire, they kick it right
Yeah.
back in.
Yeah.
So there was, and then I thought there were so what really came to mind was this whole victim perpetrator bystander thing, which we, for us, we had like The Accused was one of those movies that really took, but I thought
Oh,
of it.
yeah. That was
Yeah.
a rough one.
But this quote came to mind, which I think is, again, I'm always on this thing in terms of, like pain is like a lot of the problems we have as humans is because we think pain is a problem and we try to get rid of it rather than just, you know, but so what this great quote from this, I don't know, have you ever read that book, Trauma and Recovery? It's a Judith Herman book.
No.
Okay. So it's good. It's like about, it says it's trauma and recovery, the aftermath of violence from domestic abuse to political terror. And it's old, but it's really worth if you're interested in,
Yeah.
trauma. Um, but this quote really showed up for me when I was watching. So it's very tempting to take the side of the perpetrator. All the perpetrator asks is that the bystander do nothing. He appeals to the universal desire to see, hear, and speak no evil. The victim, on the contrary, asks the bystander to share the burden of pain. The victim demands action, engagement, and remembering. So that's kind of
Yeah.
what it made me think about. And in a way, she was remembering Nina. That whole part where she was confronting him. She's
Yeah.
like, wanted to write her name on him with a knife. And
Yeah.
so to be remembered, and remembering is really important, because if we don't remember, we can fall into the same traps over and over again, right? Like, uh, if we don't remember the past. But anyway, yeah, that's what sort of came to mind about it. That it was
It's
like a
interesting.
real, yeah.
No, it's funny that you bring up, like, the bystanders in this were primarily the women, um, who did nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Dean Walker Madison, um, did nothing. And I mean, I even though Joe, I think, was the one videotaping it. I mean, it's sort of like in um uh there's still so much to say about the substance. I was going to say something about like the camera, basically being almost like phallic. It's the male gaze, but it also was like flush with the cameraman's crotch,
Mm-hmm.
filming the aerobic stuff, like, zooming in on um Sue's ass and her tits and all that kind of thing. And in videotaping the rape, he's also he's a perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
He's also, it's an act of violence, and the male gaze. But but like, in both instances, um it's like, it's interesting how the women can are complicit. you know they're complicit in what happened to Nina, and also in what happened to Cassie in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then, of course, you've got Elizabeth and Sue complicit, as two sides of the same coin, I suppose. um what I know I've mentioned this to you before, but like, what really I find interesting, because you talk about the lessons that Cassie teaches, and I couldn't help but watch this movie without watching it and seeing all of, like, the biblical symbolism in throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the name Cassie sounds a lot like Cassiel, who was an angel. And Cassiel was an angel of duality, in some, like, in some sort of like mythic kind of interpretation, duality. And it's interesting because Cassie, it has duality in the movie. She becomes these characters. She's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like ditzy and helpless by day, at the coffee shop and with her parents, and she still like sleeps in a little girl room and wears a little girl bathrobe, like a pink bathrobe, and like there's all these sort of like girlish kind of gendered things, like her pink bathrobe, her pink suitcase, and all that kind of stuff. But by night, she becomes like this vengeful. Cassiel's also a vengeful angel, and she is imparting wisdom. She's teaching,
Mm.
and she's avenging Nina. Um, in her little girl room, when she's sitting on the bed, like, if you look at the headboard, it looks like angel wings. And then there's like artwork at the cafe, and she's standing. There's a long period of time, and I'm like, Emerald Fennell, she's very deliberate. If you see Saltburn, very deliberate. There's a lot to say about that movie too. But there is a halo above Cassie's head.
Mm.
And then, uh, you know, there's also warnings. I mean, she's teaching lessons and she's giving warnings to
Mm-hmm.
these guys. And there's opportunities for redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And when she's at the lawyer's house, and this is interesting because I think of the lawyer as being like the Apostle Peter. He is immediately contrite. He explains that, it wasn't, he was sort of required by his work to do the things that he did. And he asks for forgiveness. And he literally kneels at her feet, and
Mm-hmm.
she forgives him, as Jesus did in the Bible. He forgives Peter. He does not forgive Judas. Or Judas, I think, is forgiven, but it was, yeah, no, I don't think he's cast away. But But Ryan is very much a Judas because it's the ultimate betrayal, right? Cassie loved and she believed in him, and he never apologizes to her. He
Mm-hmm.
never redeems himself to her. In fact, he basically spits in her face, by just, she leaves and he has to leave her with a parting shot of telling her essentially that she's a loser.
Mm.
And so he's like Judas, ultimate betrayal. And she is the sacrificial lamb. She sacrifices herself in the name of her best friend. And in some ways, the sacrifice is in a way for women everywhere, because her story will be told, right? Everyone's
Yeah.
going to know. Madison's going to know. Dean Walker's going to know. Um, they're all going to see that Al Monroe, like, he raped Nina and he killed Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course the last song that plays in the movie is, Angel of the Morning, which I feel like is, kind of making the point of what Cassie was.
Ugh, I love that analysis. I know nothing about the Bible except for that it's terrifying to me, but that's really interesting. Yeah.
It's the Bible as literature was a required course when I was in college, and I remember like slogging through it, and then just really, it's that thing, you start to really see, when you see when it's and what would be weird is if Hamilton had like no, she did not make that movie with any kind of biblical references, except that it just seems so deliberate. It seems very clear that that is what is trying to be communicated. Um, but yeah, so both movies are kind of pessimistic.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting to me that one is so about internalized anger and one is so about externalized. And they are, I mean, they're, it's like, I mean, it seemed like Cassie was willing to be a martyr or willing to go there to her love was so pure for her friend, and
Yeah.
it didn't feel as depressing, I guess, as the first one, as the substance,
Yeah.
but
Like
pessimistic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember the first time I saw a promising young woman, I cried at the end because
Yeah.
I was like, no. Um, oh yeah, I should say that, they found her Nina necklace in the fire, uh, uh, which is, again, you can like think about fire and like rebirth and Phoenix and things like that. But her Cassie necklace, she left for Gail at the cafe. Her boss finds like that Cassie had left the necklace, and like the joke's on everybody because she was very clear. I mean, you can tell she was a med student that was doing well in medical school because she orchestrated everything. Nothing was by accident.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, like, oh, and then the first image you see when the movie opens is she is positioned like she had been crucified, which foreshadows the movie, which foreshadows the end of the movie. I suppose we should probably wrap up. Curious if people like our kind of discussion, our movie discussions. It just seemed like we should talk about these things because it's timely and relevant, right?
Yeah, and it's really fun. It's a muscle I don't exercise very
Yeah,
much anymore. And there's like what we used to talk about this in film school, like how, a film or a book or whatever is a text and we come to it as a text. And
yeah,
like it reminds me of sort of like dream analysis where the dreamer gets something out of the analysis and then you get something out of it by interacting with the dream. And so there's just a lot to chew on, and it made me think about a lot of things, and listening to your experience and your thinking was really, you know just this whole thing about conversation and learning and thinking about things more deeply. It's so much fun.
yeah. It is. It is. Yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
excited, Shannon. It's dude. There's still so much we didn't get into the abject with the substance, but that's okay because
Oh
you
God, yeah.
honestly we could talk for days about each movie, and we just can't. We can't. You know, could you imagine if we did like a 15-part series on the substance? Holy crap!
Oh man.
People are like, give it a rest. Let's get back to porn and true crime.
Oh, and we still haven't done a. We have to do a supernatural episode sometime.
We should. We should.
Gotta think of something
Um,
spooky.
yeah.
Okay, so people, listeners, hello. We have like people listening. I don't know who they are. Tim was saying he's like, it's so funny you do a podcast and you don't really get a lot of feedback. I mean, my friend Mia has given us feedback.
Yeah. We also
Tim,
haven't gone like really done a big kind of push.
true.
We will eventually.
So if you're listening, we would love if you have feedback for us. You could always email us at secretpassagepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at or X at Secret Pass Pod, Instagram or Secret Passage Podcast. We do have a Facebook page, but I don't, there's no action there.
Yeah.
And then you
Instagram,
could please, yeah, and Instagram, and please, if you like us, please subscribe and like
please.
and rate our podcast.
Yes. Awesome, Shannon. I'll see you next week for our next
Yeah.
episode.
See you next week. You want to do our awkward sign off?
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.